Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining Eniac for our annual general meeting. I'm Anna Nitschke, and I will be guiding you through today's program. This is the first time we're hosting this meeting virtually, and we're very excited that this allows us to share a part of it, not just with our limited partners, but also with you, our co-investors, founders, friends, and family. We have a fun agenda ahead, so without further ado, let's kick it off. Our general partner, Hadley Harris, is sitting down for a chat with two-time Eniac-backed founder and CEO of Attentive, Brian Long. Please enjoy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hadley Harris, co-founder of Eniac. I'd like to give a special welcome to the Eniac LPs out there, as well as members of the broader community who have joined us. Thanks for coming today. I have quite a treat for you today. I have Brian Long, the co-founder and CEO of Attentive. We're really fortunate to have gotten to work with Brian twice now. First with his first company, Tap Commerce, where we were the first investor and board member, and that sold for $100 million after the Series A. And then again with Attentive. A couple data points on Attentive. In just less than 5 years, they have over 3,000 customers. They grew that customer base by over 270% last year. They just raised a $470 million Series E, and they've burned less than $100 million in their whole time. And then probably most importantly, they drive 18.5% of their customers' total online revenue via messaging. I'm definitely biased, but I think Attentive is the most exciting venture-backed startup anywhere right now. So really excited to have him. Brian, thank you for joining us.
Hadley, thanks for having me on. LPs, thanks for your initial confidence in us. We're thrilled to have you be part of this journey, and we're really excited about where things are going.
So for the folks out there that don't know much about Attentive, what do you guys do?
Yeah, so vision for the company is to be able to change the way that businesses are communicating with consumers. We think that consumers in the next 3 to 5 years are going to expect real-time, personalized two-way communication via messaging. So we've built out a platform to enable text-based messaging that starts at the top of the funnel with marketing messages, but gets more tailored with very personalized messages and gives updates on everything from when a product shipped to making a purchase to customer service. And as we continue to build intelligence onto that platform, we think this offers a great experience for the consumer, but also a must-have for any B2C business, really.
Having gotten to work with you now for 8 or 9 years, I think one of your superpowers is really understanding what the market needs and crafting a product to fit that need. If you go back to the very early days of Attentive, or what was then known as Franklin, you guys were trying a couple different things, one of which was what became Attentive. Maybe take us back to that process and how you were able to go from kind of that experimental phase to finding the clear product market fit that you guys obviously found.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that when you have an idea for a business, you get excited and you want to start scaling that and pushing that and building that as the entrepreneur. And I think it's important to also separate that excitement from the metrics, your goals, and how you're really doing, and taking a critical eye to how things are going. For us, we started out with the idea of messaging and text, but we were going to use it for communication inside of a workforce as well as communicating with customers. I did over 100 demos of that product, and the communication with customers was what was clearly resonating the most. So that's really where we decided to focus our business. I think secondly, to me, within at least the enterprise software world, and I think this can apply a little more broadly, but it certainly is true of enterprise software. There are kind of 3 types of software. There's software that helps companies to make more money. there's software that helps companies to save money. And then there's software that you're not really sure what it does, but it doesn't make or save money directly, but it solves,
Yeah.
it solves some problem. And, you know, from a difficulty basis, I think that the easiest thing to grow and sell and to make really successful is almost always bucket number one, things that help companies to drive revenue, drive growth. That's what they're trying to do. That's their purpose, right? That's not to say that there aren't great businesses built that help companies save money or that help companies to solve other problems that are less related to revenue. There's great companies that do 2 and 3. I think it's just much harder. So doing the thing that's number one, helping companies drive revenue and hearing this feedback from the market, I think just has made it easier for us.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And you've obviously gravitated towards that first bucket with both of your businesses. When you guys were starting, you know, based on the success of Tap Commerce and having spent time as a leader at Twitter, you guys could have raised money from anyone. Why'd you choose to work with us again? This is an obvious puff-up question.
Well, you know, I think that we had such a great experience working with you personally, as well as the extended Eniac partner team, that I recall sitting down with my co-founders when we kind of looked at all the different offers we had, and we said, you know, why are we going to make this harder on ourselves? Why take risk and work with folks that we haven't worked with before and don't know? We already love the people we worked with before. And it's a great opportunity to just do that again. And, you know, I would add to that we didn't decide to work with everyone that we had worked with before, because we didn't have the best experience with everyone, but we had a really fantastic experience with Eniac, and that's why we chose to partner again.
Awesome. No, I obviously really appreciate that, and feel very humbled that you guys chose to work with us again. You know, this has been a really fast growth company. You guys have gone from 3 people to a pretty large organization, you know, having raised quite a bit of money and very fast growth. Tell us about some of those major inflection points along the way. Where were those kind of kinks in the curve?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, you know, we started the company in September 2016 with a handful of people, and now we've got about 700 and something people that work at the company, and we'll probably be over 1,000 by the end of this year. So, yeah, in about 4.5 years, we've grown to a pretty significant scale, and certainly that's come with its bumps along the way. In terms of kind of what those inflection points are, I think coming back to your earlier question around kind of when you know something is working, product market fit. When we were first taking our product to market, very few companies were using messaging, using text in order to communicate with customers. And when we went out to sell it, you know, people were interested, but they certainly weren't, you know, actively looking for solutions in this area like they are today. It was very much a evangelical type pitch that you had to sort of really push the idea. And I think that the turning point for us the first time, the sort of the first phase there, was when we were running our first programs for customers, and we saw those programs achieving our big target metrics. And we knew that it would qualify as a product that would make more revenue for them. Like, just, it was clearly making a lot more revenue. When we saw that happening, I think that was probably the first sort of true inflection point for us, when we went from saying, are we doing the right thing, to we're doing the right thing, we just need to invest in it and get ahead of it, because we think we're actually pretty early for this market. So that was the first one. I think the second one was probably a year and a half later, in the run up to holiday of 2018, where into 2019, where we just saw a tremendous increase in interest from customers. And what happened was, we had a couple kind of cool cutting edge brands that were using us during the holiday season, and other brands saw them doing it, and they said, oh, wow, there's other people doing this. That's pretty cool. We should do that too. And I think that sort of natural marketing of another brand doing it, we should do it too. that sort of fear of missing out was sort of the accelerant for our second phase there.
Got it. Cool. You mentioned kind of bumps along the way. Anytime you're going from, again, like 3 people to 1,000 people in 5 years, and kind of the maturity level that you guys are at in terms of a business, there's going to be challenges along the way, especially with that type of rapid scaling. Share some of those challenges that could be helpful for other founders out there.
I think the biggest question that you ask yourself sometimes, we were actually talking about this morning, is like, so is X problem like a normal problem for companies like this, that like this just happens and you have these issues and you just deal with them, and that's just kind of what it is like to be at the scale that we're at? And or is this like unique to us in any certain way? Because I think that's probably the biggest thing, because you just see different types of problems and you're trying to see, are these normal problems or is this just really weird for us? I think is the first thing that you kind of ask around your community and figure out what the issue is. I think that there's certainly a factor here too that I think ups the difficulty a little bit with it all being remote, right? I mean, since we've been remote, we've went from a company of about 170 people to 700. So, you know, most of the people have never been to the office or met anyone at the company. And we're lucky in that I think because we have the original 170, they act as a connective tissue between the company. If we didn't have that at all, I think that'd be challenging. And that's not a whole knock to just the remote workforce idea. I think it's just the idea that even if you're remote, doing some things in person, doing some meetings, being able to make some connections there is required, even if your company predominantly works remotely.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. You've kind of 4x during COVID in terms of the team. How have you thought about establishing a sense of community within the organization and culture within the organization during that time, given the remote circumstances?
Yeah, look, it's very hard. You know, we try to over communicate. We were doing weekly all hands for a long time. Now we do them bi-weekly. You know, I send out a lot of messages to the team about things that are going on. You know, we have someone who sends out basically department level updates on everything happening in each department to the entire company as like a 3-page summary every week. So, you know, we also have an internal events person that's been running events across divisions and teams and doing all sorts of virtual events and virtual meetups and random coffees. So we've done a lot of things. It still doesn't get to where you would normally be at meeting in person and doing in-person stuff, but, you know, hopefully it'll get us across to where that will be, you know, in the coming quarters. Got it.
No, that makes sense. And then what can you tell us about where Attentive's going forward? What do you think the business looks like in 5-7 years out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as I noted a little earlier, I think that businesses are going to be expected to have a way for consumers to communicate with them in a reliable, two-way, personalized way. And we want to be able to deliver that for all businesses that are working with consumers globally. You know, we have a bent towards businesses that are selling something to the consumer that can be sold digitally, whether that has to be something that is then shipped to the consumer or is a digital good, or even they buy it and then they go pick up their burger in person. You know, that's all great. Mm-hmm. I think the point is just our focus, again, is around that idea of driving revenue for the business. And if you're driving some sort of digital sale, which, you know, the majority of businesses are, then it's a lot easier to show that you're driving those sales. And I like that direct connection to driving the sale.
Yep, that makes sense. And then I have a feeling we probably have a lot of founders, aspiring founders, folks really just starting out right now with us today, having started now 2 successful businesses. What's one piece of advice you would have for folks just starting out right now as founders?
I think that you can't spend too much time talking to your customers, whether that is a business like ours that's selling to other businesses and selling SaaS software, Or if you got a consumer-facing product, whatever it might be, whatever vertical it is, I think you got to find your customers and you just got to talk to them and continue to get their feedback and learn what they want. Especially customers that are sort of more wanting to innovate and pushing to innovate and on the cutting edge. That's really for us help shape our product roadmap, what we do, what we hear, all that sort of stuff. So I think that's the thing, and where I've seen businesses run into issues at the earliest stage is when they spend a lot of time building, but not enough time, pitching that product and really getting it. And then secondly, I think trying to add some objectivity to the go out there and pitch it process is important. I guess it's a couple simple things. One, when going out and pitching your product, maybe you're going out, you're talking to folks and you want to get them to try to see if they would use your product. I like to end it with a quick survey where we say, okay, great, thanks so much. On a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being not at all interested, 10 being sign me up today and I will pay for this. I'm first in line and I will pay for this. How would you rate your level of interest in the product? Because a clear number rating, often is very different, but gives a lot more clarity than what you thought you heard in the conversation. People tend to hear what they want to hear. And you'll go through a conversation and you'll say, wow, this person's so interested. Oh man, they're so excited that they're to get into this product. And then you give it a score 1 through 10. And you're like, this guy's going to say a 10. And it's like, no, we're going to give it a 6. It's a 6. And you're like, oh, okay. Why is it a 6? And then you hear the real feedback, right? You hear the real feedback after you get that rating. So we've been doing that for a while. And I think it adds a lot more clarity, and it also uncovers what the real issues are. And why do you need to do that? It's not because people lie to you. That's not the reason. Most people are inherently very courteous, very nice. Most people don't want to hurt your feelings. Most people don't want to create conflict, especially if they're a friend of yours or something like that. So they're not going to be, forefront with their feedback and their harsh critical thoughts. They're just going to say, that sounds great. That sounds great. And then, but you have to press them to understand what are the real issues and how they really rank it. And, I think if we had done that even earlier on, we would have figured things out a little faster, and it helps us tremendously now.
That's great. Very tangible and actionable advice. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for joining us, but even more for choosing to work with Eniac a second time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hadley. We wouldn't be here without your help and support and guidance. And I also thank the extended Eniac family for their overall help in getting our business off the ground and where it is. We wouldn't be here without you. So thank you. You guys are lucky to work with such a great firm.
Thanks.
Thank you, Hadley and Brian. That was really insightful. I personally loved Brian's point that as a founder, you cannot spend too much time talking to your customers. To continue on the startup journey, Eniac founders Laura Spiekerman, Sabine Bate, and Mike Kajewski are joining us next on a panel to discuss finding product market fit and the hurdles that they faced along the way. The panel is hosted by Anthony Ha, who we're really excited to welcome to the Eniac team as of this week as Vice President of Content. Anthony joins us from TechCrunch, where he was a senior writer for 9 years. Please enjoy.
Hello, I'm Anthony Ha, and this is the first time I'm saying this publicly. I am the new Vice President of Content at Eniac Ventures, and I am excited to be hosting this panel. We are going to be talking about product market fit and whatever other fun things come up in talking to these founders about sharing their stories and how they got to where they are now. Why don't we have each of our panelists introduce themselves? You can tell us who you are and give us 1 or 2 sentences tops about what your company does. Laura, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thanks, Anthony. I'm Laura Spiekerman. I'm a co-founder and chief revenue officer at Alloy. Alloy is an operating system for identity in the financial services space. So we work on KYC, risk, AML, fraud issues for both fintech companies and banks. And we've been around about 5 years. We're headquartered in New York City.
All right. How about Zubin?
Hi, I'm Zabeen Besse, co-founder and CEO at Fuzzy Pet Health. Fuzzy is a pet telemedicine company that offers pharmaceuticals and medications. We're building the front door for pet health and well-being to empower and educate pet parents to help them extend and enrich their pets' lives. We're based in San Francisco.
And last but not least, Mike.
I'm Mike Kajeski. I'm the co-founder and CEO of MetCrypt. MetCrypt helps healthcare technology companies build cybersecurity features into their products. So you may have heard of this episode of a TV show called Homeland, where the vice president's pacemaker gets hacked. We try to help medical device companies prevent that from happening in the real world.
Awesome. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about each of your stories. We can go back to Laura for a second. And Laura, why don't you just tell us where the idea for Alloy came from?
Sure. So my co-founders and I worked together at another startup before Alloy. So about 6 years ago, we worked together in a very early stage startup doing payments online, where we were there on ACH payments as part of onboarding. So how you get your money into a crypto wallet or online brokerage. And there's all sorts of user experience issues there. Payments is one of them. I want to get my money into my Robinhood account fast, right? Because I want to, buy GameStop. And so speed of ACH is really, really important. But the other part that we came across was that identity was really important. If you couldn't, if Robinhood or a bank couldn't properly validate your identity, you as the user were put through this kind of onerous, burdensome KYC, manual KYC, know your customer process. You might have to fax in documents. You might have to scan your driver's license. And that means you as a customer have a bad experience. It means that bank or fintech company has kind of a higher risk of losing you, or a bigger kind of back office cost to actually serve you and validate you. And so we realized that there should be an API for that. This is sort of the API-ification of financial services was starting back in 2015, and we kind of hopped on that bandwagon and decided to pursue that. So we're still at the same thing 5 years later.
And so it sounds like you obviously know a lot about the financial services industry, but how then did you go about going from an idea to figuring out where a product market fit was? I mean, this is going to be a question I'm asking all of you, but I feel like in banks in particular, that seems like, they're not, I don't think of them as being super eager to adopt new technology. Yeah,
no, they are not. And we built this product really for fintech companies. We didn't know anything about banks. None of us came from banks. We sort of very naively came into this thinking banks had this all figured out. And we were just going to go after fintech companies. We were going to go after sort of the same type of customer that maybe a Plaid would, right? So an early stage fintech developer who has a great idea for the next app that they want to create, savings app, for example, but doesn't want to have to build all of these very kind of mundane, but really expensive and critical building blocks like identity, like money movement. And so we started with those as our primary kind of customers, and they were the handful of first customers because they'll use new technologies. They're willing to try new things. Banks, on the other hand, as you can imagine, not interested in trying a whole lot of new technologies from a 5-person company who has no money and barely knows what they're doing. We eventually convinced, a couple of years into it, we did realize that banks didn't have this down. So we thought, okay, we should try to get to them. We convinced a couple of fintech friendly banks to work with us. So those were community banks that were kind of at a very high level strategically placing themselves alongside fintech companies. They were saying, look, I'm branches aren't the future. I need to figure out how to work with fintech companies or launch my own digital products, or both. So banks like Radius Bank, for example, Cross River Bank, those are these, relatively small banks that maybe you've never heard of, but are actually behind some of the biggest fintech companies in the country. And so that was our target kind of first set of banks that we actually could start convincing to use our product. They were willing to take a chance on us. And so we did that for a couple of years. This is a long haul. We started this in 2015 and we probably didn't sign a bank until 2017. And we didn't sign a big bank until 2019. So this stuff just took a really long time. So I think product market fit in our case was about persistence and just not dying. And we have Eniac to thank for not dying.
Well, I do want to get back to all of those themes. But I do also want to touch base with some of other panelists as well. As you people watching can tell, we have some very different startups joining us today. So we're going to jump, at least for now, from banks and fintechs to telehealth. And Zubin, obviously, here at the beginning of 2021, telehealth seems like a really obvious and necessary idea. I don't know that it was quite as clear to me a few years ago. How did you feel that, or decide that telehealth for pets was something that needed to exist?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I also think that for within the bubbles that we live in today, I think telehealth does seem like it's having its moment right now. But for the majority of people, that may not necessarily be the case. And so we actually started our business 5 years ago, and we weren't focused on telehealth. We started the business because I had an experience getting vet care for my dog, and I rushed into an emergency vet clinic. I spent 5 hours in a waiting room, and eventually, after 2 hours with the vet, I got a bill for $2,500. And it really hit me that the process of getting vet care for your pet at a moment that is incredibly stressful and anxiety ridden is also a really bad user experience and can be incredibly expensive. And what really hit us was there are 200 million dogs and cats in this country. And more than 100 million of them don't have access to any vet care at all. So our initial business model was focused on membership-based in-home vet care services. And folks would pay us a membership fee, and annually we'd send a couple of vets out to your home a couple of times a year, and they do basic checkups on your pet. So think One Medical for pets, but delivered in the comfort of your home. And after launching in San Francisco, we expanded to New York. And the thing that really hit us was scaling that business was really operationally complex, and having veterinarians based around the country was also pretty cost intensive. So at the end of 2019, we actually made the decision to shut down our in-home care service and pivot our business to telehealth and telehealth-driven commerce. And I think that the thing for us that really got us excited was consumer behaviors were shifting. People wanted access to healthcare products and services digitally rather than spending hours in a waiting room. And we'd seen that play out in human healthcare for a couple of years. And we realized that the opportunity for pets was even more amplified. It was even a bigger opportunity, and actually had a much better value proposition, because anyone that's had to take your pet to a vet clinic in the last year to 2 years has had to deal with the friction associated with getting vet care. So we pivoted our business at the beginning of 2020. And as luck would have it, we kind of fell out on the lucky end of the spectrum here. COVID was a natural accelerant to our business. I call that lucky guilt in some way. So the last 12 to 18 months has certainly been a really wild and exciting ride for us. But what I think that has led to is just an acceleration into digital driven care. And I think the people that we speak to today, and the industry folks that we speak to, tell us that they don't really see us shifting back into a predominantly physical driven care operating model. Digital is here to stay, and it's actually going to be extended in terms of what its capability is of delivering care to people, human and pets as well.
And when you think about that, I mean, I feel like that's certainly that idea of the pandemic accelerating a lot of existing trends is one that we hear about quite a bit. But as you're trying to figure out what your business looks like when the pandemic is over, what were the things that made you feel confident that this is a permanent shift, and that, you know, in 6 months, everyone's not just going back to their regular vets?
I think the user experience, the NPS, and the customer feedback and customer insights that we were receiving, and also the data around when people were using our service and how they were using it. People tend to use our service on average between 6 to 12 times per year. On average, we have the super users that are that have a lot of anxiety, typically first-time pet parents that are trying to figure out and navigate the journey of being a first-time pet parent, and they're using it significantly more. But what that compares to is the typical experience of going into a veterinary clinic where people are only using that service once a year. And so people want access to healthcare information and health services more frequently, and more accessibly than what they were before. I think the period of kind of forums and people Googling some symptoms and the rabbit hole that puts people down every time, people felt like that wasn't really the user experience that they wanted to go to. And the other thing that really hit home for us over the course of the last 12 months is people find that the digital experience is actually more personable in some ways today than what it is taking your pet into a vet clinic. Don't get me wrong, there will always be a need for physical care, and there will always be a need for people taking their pets into a vet clinic. You can't operate on a dog digitally. That's just not possible. But what we found is the ability for people to get access to information, to care, to triage immediately within 30 seconds kind of is an order of magnitude better than Googling some symptoms, trying to call up your vet clinic, being forced to go into an emergency vet clinic, and then having to part with hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And the more personable aspect is if you take your pet into a vet clinic today, you drive into a parking lot, someone comes to collect your pet, and you're lucky to get a phone call from the vet once they've examined your pet. Whereas digital care allows you to have a more personal relationship where you can see the veterinarian, they can see you, they can advise you on what you can do. And what we're finding with a lot of people today is they want to feel a tighter bond with their pets. Pets are the new kids. I think 95% of people that have a pet identify with that pet as part of the family. And so they want to be more involved in how to deliver and administer care and tighten the bond that they have with their pets. And that really kind of all lends itself to how we think about the future of how people care for their pets.
Right. All right. So we're going to have another topic shift to something that's kind of related, medical device cybersecurity. Mike, I know you started MetCrypt over concerns about that security. So tell me a little bit about how you went from, hey, this is a problem, to translating that into an actual product.
Yeah, so in 2014, I was working for a medical device manufacturer when I started to hear primarily hospitals asking questions about if a cybersecurity vulnerability in a medical device could actually lead to physical harm in a patient. And that wasn't something that I had considered before. I had considered, patient data privacy issues and, data loss and getting access to a patient's social security number, but I hadn't thought about a patient being physically harmed. So my background is in the technology of imaging and radiation oncology. So I'm fairly familiar with how these medical devices work and how they're built. And every day when I would drive to the office, I would pass the Nest office, the Nest thermostat office. And one of the interesting things about healthcare is if you want to do something innovative in healthcare, just see what was done in other industries 10 years ago and apply it to healthcare today, because it's chronically 10 to 20 years behind when it comes to technology. So I'm like, all right, here's Nest. They've got connected thermostats in all of these homes. And you don't hear a whole lot about these devices being hacked or being vulnerable. And in fact, if you go on Hacker News and you look at people who sort of played around with the Nest thermostat, there's some pretty good security controls in place. So we just looked at what were the best practices in modern IoT devices and figured out ways to package those same features for a medical device manufacturer.
Right. And so when people talk about finding product market fit, there's often this emphasis on testing and iterating. And I have to imagine this is a field where you don't, necessarily just want to ship an MVP to everyone, because that could go really badly. So how do you get that testing and experimentation into the process safely?
Yeah. So there are definitely some things that I wish that I had known 5 years ago when we started on this. To some degree, if you're making a new drug or you're making a new medical device, you're not testing whether or not a new neurostimulator is going to get product market fit as you design it and you release it, right? You know that there's a problem, you know the right way to fix it, and you build the device. And it may take 5 or 10 years to build that device. In some ways, our technology looks a lot like a medical device because there's a sort of long development cycle and we're going into these products. But on the other hand, I think when we first started back in 2015, we tackled what I now understand to be the hardest aspect of the problem. I'm actually getting cryptography on these devices themselves. And at the time, we're like, yeah, that's the right way to fix the problem. And this is easy, we got it covered. There were, in fact, some easier, maybe edge cases that we could have started with, where the total addressable market would have been smaller, but we would have been able to better test different theories where we're giving medical device manufacturers code that might not actually go into a patient directly, but interfaces with the device that goes into the patient. So that's one of the things we've done in the last few years, is sort of diversified our product portfolio to include those really in-depth, technologically complicated products that go, possibly directly on a pacemaker, but also some just web-based tools that device manufacturers can use to assess their security posture, to manage that over time. And those are the sorts of products where you can iterate much more quickly without fear of harming a patient.
Great. So I would love to sort of pull back a little bit, or actually just kind of maybe go a little bit further into the process where, as presumably people have figured out, part of the reason these three founders are here is because they are all backed by Eniac. And I'm curious how, especially as a newcomer, how Eniac has been involved in that process, and if there's anything. We probably can't cover the full relationship, maybe we don't want to, but if there's anything you can pull out in terms of like a piece of advice or some way that Eniac supported you through this process as you're trying to figure all of this out, maybe Mike will put you on the spot first.
Yeah, I remember after we got a term sheet from Eniac, we were doing some diligence talking to other founders they had that they had backed. I remember reading somewhere, if you want to know what it's like to work with an investor, find the founder of a company that they invested in that failed and ask them how things went when it failed. And I didn't quite go to the lengths of finding somebody that meets that criteria, but every time I talked to a founder, I asked them like, hey, when things aren't going great, when you're having a problem, what is it like to work with the Eniac team? And universally, I just got great glowing reviews that, there are two types of investors. When something goes wrong, there's a type that you don't want to call, and there's a kind that you call immediately. And Eniac has been the fund that, I will call immediately if there's some sort of issue. They've been, always willing to, Tim in particular, always willing to think through things, give me some insight into what other portfolio companies have done when they've encountered similar issues. They've been really, really helpful.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. Zubin.
Hey, Anthony. Great question. I think we've been working with the Eniac team for almost 4 years now. So it's been a long journey. And when we first connected with the Eniac team, I met with Nihal, and what really stood out to me is just the focus on people and the focus on more than just the company, more than just the idea, but really the commitment to building and developing people and building and developing leaders. And with me, I was a first-time founder and kind of still wet behind the ears, and I still am, and I'm still figuring things out. But the commitment from the Eniac team, and when I say the team, I think one other thing that stands out to me is Nihal was definitely my point person, or our point person as a company. But I have interfaced and interacted with everyone from Hadley to Tim to Nihal and Vic. Anna and the team have always been super supportive. And so the commitment from that team to kind of really be supportive, be there through the good times, help kind of figure out and unlock areas of opportunity within the business, unlock areas of opportunity within the team, and then really committing to figuring out how I could be a better leader and how we could invest in other people on our team to be better leaders too. And all of those things have been incredibly helpful and invaluable through the 4 years that we've had a relationship. So it speaks to why we continue to have a great relationship now, and why Nihal and the Eniac team are still one of the first calls that we make when we're trying to evaluate what we're doing as a company and evaluate some tricky decisions to make.
Awesome. Laura, what about you?
This is a tough question because I think, like, no matter who you'd ask me about, my instinct is going to be I'm publicly saying nice things about anyone. So I hope this comes off as authentic. But and Nihal was on our board for a long time and led our investment. Like, he is just the best. They are the most founder-friendly firm I've ever worked with, by far. I can't even sort of convey how I feel about this. I'll add, he's not on our board anymore. We have raised subsequent rounds, and yet the other night it was like 10 o'clock his time, and I called him with something, and he was like, "Yeah, I can chat right now. What's up?" And I think Tim called my co-founder last week at night, and they are there for us through thick and thin. We had a couple of years really where like nothing good happened in our business. It was kind of stuck in the mud. I think no investors were interested, and he could have walked away. He could have ignored us. He could have written us off to some extent. He was just ultra supportive. And I think the biggest thing for me, and this is when we go into subsequent rounds of funding, when we talk to investors about what we want, my co-founder and I have this philosophy of that empathy with with the journey that we're going through as founders is the number one quality we care about. And I think Eniac has that in leaps and bounds. They know this is tough. They are not here to, shame you on all the mistakes you've made, because you're going to make a lot. We've made a ton. They're just sort of along for the ride to kind of have your back. He's our biggest champion. So there aren't enough good things I can say there. And I think as a firm, that's just core, that's like in their DNA. They just want to kind of be behind the founders, and the founders are their customers, I suppose.
Great. Well, I have like a whole bunch of other things I want to ask, but I also know that we're pretty much out of time. So I will just thank Laura, Zubin, and Mike for being with me. Everyone, if you haven't already, check out Alloy, Fuzzy, and MetCrypt. Thanks again.
Hi again. I hope you all enjoyed hearing from some of our founders on their product market fit journeys. Thank you for hosting, Anthony, and a big thank you to Laura, Zubin, and Mike for sharing these interesting details about your companies. For the final part of today's public program, Eniac General Partner Nihal Mehta sits down to chat with New York City mayoral candidate Andrew Yang to talk all things New York tech. Let's see what they have to say.
Founders, friends, LPs, thanks for tuning in. Last but not least, we have an extra special guest, a friend of ours in Eniac for many years, started as a founder, an executive. He ran for president of the United States. He told us, I think before most of the world knew that he was running for president of the United States. Felt like a privileged few. Actually, when I got the news, I was like, oh my God, Andrew's running. And somebody's like, yeah, he told me too. I'm like, oh man, are you serious? I felt special for a second. But
that was the first, you were the second. Nihal, friend of Eniac, Andrew Yang, yes.
Nice. Woo! And now, of course, running for the mayor of New York City, which is near and dear to a lot of our hearts. So Andrew, we're so privileged to have you and to have a few minutes with you to get into your mind and to ask some questions. But thanks for being here.
Oh, it's great to be here. And Nihal, you and I have been friends for years. You're a visionary. You can see the future. You can see around corners. You saw the potential in my presidential campaign before just about anyone else. So if anyone has gobs and gobs of money that they want to have allocated to impact the future positively, send it to Nihal.
Well, thank you, Andrew. You started your career also spotting talent, right, at VFA. And so obviously you know what it's like. Maybe why don't we jump in there? I think you have a really interesting relationship with entrepreneurship and the way that you kind of ran your presidential campaign and now your mayoral campaign. Maybe talk about some of your insights as a founder and how you're applying it to what you're doing today.
Yeah, I see myself more as an entrepreneur and a problem solver than a politician, which has its ups and downs, honestly. But when I decided to run for president, I approached it in the same way, where you think, okay, we have to build an operation to get 40,000 Iowans on board. Like, how do we get 40,000 Iowans on board? And so we built a campaign using a lot of the same principles that you would use in any startup environment. And a lot of it is about finding really enterprising, dynamic people who are dedicated to something, who are willing to work long hours to achieve something remarkable. And that's something that you can do in business. You can do it in nonprofits. You can do it in politics. But that's how I've operated for years, and I love nothing more than to give someone room to run and then watch them make the most of it. It's one reason why I'm so passionate about running for mayor, is that if you're in a contracting environment, it's very, very hard. Growth environments are much more conducive to people being able to live the kind of lives they want and have the kind of careers that they want. And so we need to restore New York City to a growth posture as quickly as possible. And it's born in part because of the entrepreneurial experiences you're describing that you and I have shared versions of.
Amazing. You've obviously spoken a lot about artificial intelligence and automation, and how the rise of that, can potentially augment, but also commoditize, human labor. And I think part of that has inspired you, to create potentially the largest UBI program, certainly that this country has ever seen. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Some of my investor friends have been concerned about AI replacing at least some proportion of workers for a number of years now. And I became convinced that our political system certainly didn't know what was going on and that it wasn't going to respond to it. And one of the things that many folks who'd stared at this problem for years concluded is that we're going to need some version of universal basic income. And I obviously believe they were right. And so I ran for president to advance the idea of universal basic income. And COVID has accelerated a lot of the automation trends that I was concerned about, that others were concerned about. And so we're going to need to transition to some version of cash relief, in my opinion, as quickly as possible. And the entire country has had experience with this now, getting the $1,200 check, the $600 check, the $1,400 check, the new child poverty tax credit that's going to be immensely helpful to millions of families. And so we're going to make this happen right here in New York City as well. We're going to have the largest non-federal cash relief program in the country, because I'm convinced that it will make people stronger, healthier, mentally healthier, and keep people out of homelessness and other situations that are extraordinarily costly to New York City and any community.
How do you see some of the city's biggest issues? You've spoken about things like like sanitation, maybe parking meters and tickets. How do you see some of them? I know, there's a lot of these little things that all add up, but how do you see technology, the tech industry, technical solutions solving some of these problems?
Tech community of New York City, or anywhere really, I would love your help to try and solve some of the public-facing problems on behalf of New York. And part of this is going to be using technology to make our government more user-friendly. One thing I've heard consistently is that agencies don't talk to each other, and that you'll hear one thing from one bureaucracy and then not hear from another. And if we can streamline that, that would be immensely powerful. And I think technology is going to be a big part of that. I actually think that the ability for government to deliver services in a modern and effective way is vital to actually restore public trust. It's like you have political figures saying, hey, we're going to do this and that. And then you turn around and you're like, this stuff is very difficult or hard to navigate. Or, as one recent example, when people are trying to get vaccination appointments, it was a bit of a Ticketmaster situation where people were like refreshing their different websites. And then a problem solving engineer named Hugh Ma built to just start delivering, what's the available appointment. And then you have to think to yourself, well, couldn't the city have done that?
By the way, did you see how sad he was the other day when he showed his web traffic plummeted because everybody had already gotten the vaccine?
Well, I mean, heck, that's the dream, is putting yourself out of business. Congratulations, TurboVax. way to hasten your own lesser utility.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, we have so much incredible innovation and talent to be injected, an interface injected, no pun intended. I think I still have the vaccination.
Oh, please, use some of your technical expertise on behalf of New York City, like you. I was actually talking to Hugh about something that we're going to explore more deeply, Nihal, but we want to have a tech fellowship type program where someone can solve a problem for New York without, frankly, having an entirely different career. If you work in technology, you can keep on working on technology and maybe be a fellow for New York City, have your employer hopefully support you in that.
Yeah, that'd be great. And by the way, the best products and projects that need seed capital, again, we're open for business. In terms of building the tech community, obviously, the Bay Area has been this kind of, incredible community for tech, for decades now. And I think we're starting to see escape velocity in New York City. When I moved here, for example, DoubleClick was the largest exit and you remember that, for a decade, right? And now literally every day, there was a period of time last month where every day there was a $2 to $10 billion exit or financing in New York City. How do you see this continuing to grow? Like, what are the core challenges or bottlenecks of growth?
I'm going to do everything in my power to grow the tech ecosystem in New York City. I think we should be vying for number one. That's going to include cryptocurrency, among other things. But I think that a lot of the opportunities in tech are going to be integrated with other industries in some way. So it could be tech plus fitness like Peloton, or tech plus consumer goods like Warby, or tech plus culture, tech plus fashion, tech plus finance in the form of cryptocurrency. And New York City is the largest and most diverse economy in the US. If we were a country, we'd be the 11th biggest economy in the world. So I'm going to be rolling out the red carpet for entrepreneurs and tech firms, big and small. But one of the main things we can do, frankly, to win in this is just to win on talent, which is to make New York City an appealing, exciting place to live in terms of nightlife, cultural attractions, food, office space, like what have you. Like, we have to try and compete on every front to attract both the talent and the firms.
How do you, recently, at least on Twitter, we're starting to see, certainly mid-pandemic, early pandemic, this exodus, leaving New York and San Francisco to places like Miami and Austin. A lot of those folks now are like, oh, it's like mid-April and in Miami, I gotta, or May in Miami, I gotta turn around and come right back.
Nice. Coming back to New York, Miamians.
and you mentioned, talent. It's all about the people. How do we retain talent in New York City? Given the tax rate, right, which now could be the highest in the country, and the price of housing as well.
Well, I think it's quality of opportunity. People are going to be attracted to where they think they can boost their career, develop the most personally. And then it's quality of life and culture and excitement to some extent. I think a lot of people who went to other cities are going to miss New York when they see all of us having a great time, and like on social media, it's like, oh my gosh, New York is back. What am I doing here? Like, this place is lame and empty compared to New York. So we have to try and get there as quickly as possible. And the argument I make to folks, Nihal, is that New York City has always been somewhat more expensive than Florida. It's just people were willing to pay a premium because the opportunities were better and the environment was better. And so if we make those things true again, then I think talent will vote with their feet. But if you are watching this and you are either on the fence or maybe you left New York, we'd love to have you back. It's okay.
Come back.
Yeah, come on back. You had your fun in Florida or Texas. It'll make a great story, but come on back. And I will say too, there's some deals in New York now.
Awesome. There's some deals. I hear Andrew has an extra couch, and we have one as well. So free to crash.
Welcome to the committee right here, New York City.
Exactly. You've spoken a little bit about Broadway, but tourism obviously is a huge part of New York City's economy that has been completely decimated, obviously, in the past year. Actually, I don't even see it trickling back. Starting to get small trickles, like the naked cowboy is definitely in Times Square running around, greeting folks. But like, what are the key kind of, inflection points, for things to like get Broadway back on its feet, get live concerts? I've been to a few basketball games. That's been a great experience. Only, 10 or 20% allowed in the stadium, but it's starting to trickle back. Is this just a function of time, or are there specific things that you can do, when elected mayor to really catalyze tourism?
Tourism supported about 300,000 of the 600,000 jobs that New York City is down right now. So I see getting back the 65 million plus tourists as critical to the recovery. And I'm happy to say that some of this is going to happen this year, where I think this is going to be the summer of love in New York City, because I have so many friends who've gotten vaccinated who are going on dates for the first time in over a year. Now, Nihal, you and I are happily married men, so this is not us. But but there are people who have, frankly, obviously have a lot of pent-up energy. And if you're going to find love, it's going to be New York City this summer. And then in September, Broadway is going to reopen thanks to federal stimulus money. There's a Save Our Stages Act. It put billions of dollars to work to help Broadway reopen probably in September. So I think companies will be back, Broadway will be back, which will bring a lot of the tourists back. Most people will be vaccinated, and you're going to see like a run up this summer into the fall. But to your earlier point, we're at a very, very low base right now. So even if you go from 66 million to, let's call it 0 for argument's sake, and then it's going to come back to, in my view, like the 10 to 20 million tourist level per year pretty quickly. But you have a long way to go still. So if I'm fortunate enough to be your mayor, I think that it'll be my job to try and get us from 20 to 65 again over like the following 2 years. But that's the situation. There are going to be some real legs to the recovery starting this summer.
Great. This is a good transition into our lightning round. So I had a question on Broadway. Vax certificates to get in.
Yes. Or just generally. Like I went to a Yankees game the other day, and it was either negative test or vaccine passport. And a vaccine passport is a major convenience because you get it once and then you don't have to do it again for months and months. You can just keep on flashing it.
Yep. That's the Excelsior app, or is that?
They accepted the Excelsior app, yes. At the time, I wasn't vaccinated, so I had to get the negative test.
Yeah. Great. Robot dogs, yes or no?
Oh my gosh. Like, we need to do a better job because I think people will just find them really freaky. Like, the human element needs to be taken into account. We need a little bit more time.
Yeah. Maybe naming them or putting a furry face on them. I don't know. I don't know the solution.
There are some features that we should be rethinking.
Yeah. I was having dinner in the West Village a couple of weeks ago, and it literally felt like, you said the summer of love. It felt a little bit like Mardi Gras, to-go cups in the streets. People really.
Cocktails to go will be a permanent feature of New York City if I have my way, along with outdoor dining, open streets. I think these features should be here to stay.
Great. That's the right answer. And then last but not least, I know you've been posting this recently, Zoom or IRL, and why?
As joyous as it is to be here with you via Zoom, Nihal, we learn better in person according to the data. We are more creative and innovative in person. I think that we're still human beings and we prefer to interact with human beings in real life. One person said something to me that really hit home. He said that there was like a mixed virtual and in-person meeting where you had like 4 people in person and then like 3 people virtually. And then eventually the 4 people in person just started having their own conversation. The people virtual, I'm like, oh. I just think that's the way we're wired. So if you are working remotely, you should know too that frankly your job is easier to automate away if it's remote. You know what I mean? Like according to Kevin Roos of the New York Times, is like, look, like that's one step towards automation, and I don't think that's what anyone should want. So I'm an in real life guy, and I think that New York City is the best place to bring people together to create something great.
Amazing. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time. I know you're a very busy man and probably busier now than maybe you've ever been. And we're wishing you the best. And, you have our support and our viewers' support to win this thing and, make New York City, even the most, the best and the most ambitious and the brightest city that it has always been and deserves to be.
Thank you, Nihal. Thank you, Eniac. And let's make New York City the city of the future. We can do it. The election's on June 22nd. There's that too. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Nihal and Andrew. I hope that everyone watching is just as excited about the resurgence of New York tech as we are. This does conclude the public portion of Eniac's annual general meeting. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the program. If you would like to connect with us, please reach out on Twitter. If you are an Eniac Limited partner, please enter the private session. We will be kicking off shortly.